Excellent, excellent.
So shall we start?
Right.
Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Metta Centre session with Bhante Sujato. And he will be today talking about, this is a special session because he'll be talking about Buddhist education.
Right.
Well, what kind of Buddhist education? And what are all of these books? So today we will find out more.
The answers to these mysteries.
And Bhante Sujato, of course, is the co-founder of SuttaCentral. He really headed this off, and he's spent many years learning Pali, translating the Pali texts. In fact, he stowed himself away on a deserted island of Taiwan to really put all of this together. And then he has been such an inspiration in being able to make the Pali suttas available to all of us and so accessible online and now in print as well. So we'll find out more about this amazing project as well as also other projects that he is now working on. So Bhante, thank you so much for coming to the Metta Centre and offering your time and sharing these amazing projects with all of us. I can't wait to hear more.
Tina, thank you so much for bringing people together and organising things and all this stuff that you've been doing. It's been amazing. Yeah. So we're going to spend a little bit of time together talking about Buddhist education generally, about how the Buddha communicated and brought the Dhamma to people, and specifically how we're doing that through SuttaCentral and through our project here. Now, how's time going?
There is a clock at the back of the room.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we're finishing up at 7:30, is that correct?
8.
At 8, we're finishing up at 8. I'm wondering whether we have time to sneak in a quick bit of meditation.
Definitely.
What do you think? Can I ask, would you like to have a silent meditation or a guided meditation? Which do you think is best? Who wants to have a silent meditation? Who wants to have a guided meditation? Really? Interesting. I don't ask that question so that I know what I'm going to do, because I already know the answer. I'm a bit like the FBI that way. I'm not going to ask you anything unless I know the answer beforehand. But I'm wanting to know how many people need somebody's voice inside their head telling them what to do when they meditate. What do you think? You need someone? Interesting.
I could do either.
You could do either. That's good. Resilience and flexibility is good. So I think, like, when we teach meditation, like we teach meditation with guided meditation or sometimes with meditation apps and things like that. And I think these things are good, but they're also training wheels. Yeah. So actually, the only voice that we need to listen to, guess what? Guess which one is the important one? Yeah, the voice of our own heart, actually. And nobody else can really tell you how to meditate. So when we teach meditation, we try to sort of guide you as best we can. But we need to learn to listen to what our heart is saying, and we need to learn the quality of our own experience. And that's what leads us into deeper meditation. So for this evening, let's do a bit of mindfulness of breathing meditation. And I'll say a few words about that before we begin. Now, I think probably everybody here has done some meditation. Would that be correct to assume that? Anybody never done any meditation? Okay, fine. Forget everything you know. Can you do that?
I'm still very new.
Good, excellent. Not much to forget. Excellent, that's great. So when we start meditation, the number one obstacle to meditation is thinking that we know how to meditate. So this is what they call beginner's mind in Zen, right? So each time you meditate, you have to approach it with a freshness, with a newness. Think about like if you're when you're like a child, you're like exploring the world. You know, you go into a park or into a garden, and it's amazing. Like every little thing is incredible. You see a bug, and you're like, "Oh, that's so amazing!" And all the adults are just sitting around like, "Oh, whatever. It's just a bug. Who cares?" Right? That's that mind which leaps up and finds things beautiful and interesting and intriguing and inspiring. And that's the kind of mind that will take us into meditation. So if we think too much that meditation is about mastering this technique and following these steps, it's okay to have steps to do meditation, but just hold them lightly, yeah, because the method is there to help us. It's not there to be our master. It's just there to point us in the right direction. So when we're doing mindfulness of breathing meditation, we become open to the feeling, the sensation of the breath as we're breathing in and breathing out. Mindfulness of breathing is not about concentrating. It's not about focusing. It's not about trying to be anything or get anything or have anything or anything like that. Your breath wants to calm you down. Right now, as you're sitting here, your breath is already bringing you that sense of calm. So the job that we're doing in meditation is to try to stay out of the way. Try to not interfere with the breath too much. Yeah. So we bring to the breath the most gentle form of awareness that we can. So if you want to, use a particular method, like maybe use counting with the breath, or maybe use a meditation word with the breath, any of those things are fine. But don't mistake the method for the meditation. Right? What makes the meditation work is that quality of awareness that you bring to the breath. When you're mindfully aware of your breath coming in and breath going out, then your mind will naturally become peaceful. Not because of anything that I do or say, not even because of anything the Buddha did or said, right? Because that is the nature of your mind and body. It's just how it is. The Buddha discovered this practice. He didn't make it be so. He learned about it from his own experience. So the number one way that we find the truth of the Dhamma and the truth of Buddhism is through our own inner experience. And that comes through meditation. So let's do some meditation for maybe 10 minutes or so. Does that sound good? So sitting quietly. Letting your mind settle back into your body. Taking a minute or two to just feel how your body feels when you're sitting. And just letting your body relax into your seat so that you feel energetic, upright, and yet relaxed. And then as the mind becomes settled and the body becomes settled, gradually become aware of the gentle feeling of the breath as it comes in and goes out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing in. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Easily, steadily. Letting your breath wash through you like a gentle wave. Bringing you peace, tranquility. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing, mindfully breathing out. Letting your breath take away all of your trouble. Letting your breath take away all of your pain. Letting your breath take away all your stress. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. When your mind drifts off to this or that, just be aware of it, just notice it, and bring it back. And let your breath take care of it. Oh, okay. My mind's thinking about this. It's natural. It's what minds do. Just come back and let that breath calm you down. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. And as you feel your breath becoming very soft, very subtle, it becomes like silk. It becomes like a soft glow of moonlight. And you can feel this gentle pleasure settling through your whole body. Making everything through your body feel so nice, so relaxed. So full of ease. And now coming near the end of the meditation, I want you to bring your awareness back into your exterior senses, hearing the sounds around you, noticing the touch of cloth on your skin, and just letting your mind come back to normal. But before we finish, take a minute to review back over the meditation we've just done together. Ask yourself, what just happened? How did my mind change? How did my mind feel like now? How was it at the beginning of the meditation? What kinds of thoughts were leading me astray? What was the feeling when my mind came back into the body, connected with the breath again? So it's a good idea to reflect like this for a minute or two at the end of each meditation. You don't have to find the answers, but each time you ask those, each time you look, your mind will get a little bit better wisdom, a little bit better understanding of how the meditation works. And finally, we can dedicate the merit of our practice. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings realize Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu. Buddhist education. So I'm going to talk for a little bit and maybe have some discussion and so on. But Tina, we were talking before about how you encountered Dhamma. So you were brought up in a Buddhist family, right?
Yes, thanks to my mum.
Thanks to my mum. And then that you encountered the Dhamma, when you're in how old were you?
Yeah, I was in high school.
In high school?
Yeah.
How did you come across the Dhamma then?
Well, I went to Nantian Temple and they had like little booklets.
Right.
That's like the wisdom, the wise words of Venerable Xingyu. And then I read some of the teachings that was there. And then I was so inspired.
Right.
In fact, I was so inspired, I actually gave my English teacher a book. I didn't realise that that may seem a bit too weird at the time, but I was just so inspired and I really liked this teacher, so I gave him a free book.
Oh, nice. Good.
Yeah.
Ah. And so, look, I'm sure everybody has their own story, right? How do you come across the Dhamma, right? So it always seems to be quite random. Even people who grow up in Buddhist cultures or with Buddhist background, and this is something that we hear all the time, is that people be like, oh, I never really knew the Dhamma, and people just learn some school lessons or something like that, but it doesn't mean anything. So there comes a point in the time when it means something, yeah.
I had a similar experience. Like I grew up in a Catholic family in Catholic primary school, and then they took us on an excursion to Nantian, and I was like 8 or 9, and I remember I was so obsessed. Like I loved it so much, but then I didn't really encounter it again until you came. So yeah.
Right. So seeds were there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Because you went with a class, and probably everyone liked it or whatever, but not everybody had that same thing that you had, right? Yeah. But somehow that connection's made and it stays there, comes back. So somehow we all come to Dhamma in our own kind of ways. And one of the things that we as more senior Dhamma practitioners and Dhamma teachers, our job is to sort of try to see, where people are at and sort of how can we support them, how can we nurture them in Dhamma. Now, I mentioned before that meditation is an important part of Dhamma. And my own experience, I'll tell you how I encountered the Dhamma. I encountered the Dhamma because I was in Thailand. I was a tourist. And I didn't have much money. And there was a very cheap place to stay. It's called the monastery. Yes. And you could stay there, in fact, so cheap that it was free. Fantastic. And they'd give you food and everything like that. And then, I don't know, there was this meditation thing. So I thought, why not, right? Give it a go. So I went to this monastery called Wat Ram Peng in Chiang Mai. which at the time was one of the regular places that sort of tourists would go to do a retreat. 1 month intensive retreat. That was my beginning of my practice of Buddhism. I look back on it now, it's crazy. And why would you do that? But that's what I did. And one of the things that was really interesting for me about that retreat was that they hardly taught us anything. They just told us how to meditate. And, you go away, you meditate for 8 hours, walking, sitting meditation, and then you come back and you do like a report. So you do like you see your meditation teacher and you tell them what your experience was like. So you come back the next day and you say, oh my God, there was so much pain. My legs were painful. My back was sore. My mind was all over the place. It was just like terrible the whole time. And it was like really hot and the ants were biting me. And then they'd say, well, tomorrow you can do 10 hours meditation instead. So that was how I learned how to meditate. And during that whole month-long time, they gave us a couple of very simple teachings. And they taught us some of the very basic Buddhist teachings, like impermanent suffering and not self, and a couple of things like that. But really, just that much. And that was a great lesson for me, because no one was trying to convert me. It was weird, right? Again, because I came from a Catholic background as well. Catholicism, I mean, in Australia, because I don't know what your experience was like, but I went to a Catholic school, and it was pretty kind of low key. Like Catholics in Australia are usually pretty low key about things. But, it's very much doctrine forward, right? They sort of teach from the Bible and give you sermons and these kinds of things. And there's really nothing about how to experience things. That experiential dimension is not really part of it very much. So this is really completely opposite way around. And so that's something that's always had a very deep impression on me. Like, Dhamma is something that is not, it's not something that you impose on someone. It's something that people seek out. Right? So to me, it always has to be something, it has to be something inside you that is looking for something, that needs something, and that there's something which is there. So our job is to make sure that there is something that's there when people are needing it. That's the hard part, right? Not to go shoving it down people's throats, but to be available and to provide. So when I got out of that retreat, I went to the teacher. Like that teaching was taught. There was a monk, Lumpur Bunyat, who was the main teacher on that retreat. But then there would be English-speaking assistants who were either old students, or there was a couple called Kate and Tanat who were sort of the main people who would manage and run things. And so they would do the translation for the monk who was doing the teaching. Anyway, afterwards, I went to some of the English-speaking people and said, can I have some Dhamma books? I want to read something, I want to learn something. And so, I'd read one Dhamma book beforehand. The first Dhamma book I ever read was Handbook for Mankind by Ajahn Buddhadasa. Have you read that book? You seen? Yeah. I came across that in Chiang Mai somewhere. So that was the first book I ever read. And I went to the retreat, and then afterwards I'm saying, what can I read? And they gave me a couple of books, and I read them. I thought, it's all right. It's okay. I won't reveal what those books were. They're all right, but they're a bit, I don't know. And then I said, well, where's the real stuff? I've heard about these things like they call suttas or something like that. Where's that? And they said, oh, okay, the suttas are over there. So then I went and started reading the suttas, and then never turned back. So for me, my Dhamma education has always been those two things, led by those two things, meditation and studying the suttas. Curiously enough, in Buddhism, we have an incredible history of scripture and learning and all of those kinds of things. But that plays a relatively marginal role in most forms of Buddhist education. And most of the time, and this is even true for the sangha, most of the time people really don't read what the Buddha taught. It's fairly rare for various reasons. If you want to know the reasons why, I can speculate as to the reasons why. You can ask me about that afterwards. But the reality is that in most places, they're not really going to be teaching you what the Buddha taught. Just for example, my first encounter with Dhamma was in Thailand. So in Thailand, they have like a formal series of 9 years of study, if you're one of the monks and nuns, which takes you up to basically a PhD level. And there's no sutta reading in the entire 9-year period. 0. It's just not on the curriculum. Right? So it's weird, right? I find it kind of weird. Mm. So for me, this is always the most important thing. And I believe that if we're going to be understanding the Dhamma, then we should all have a good grounding in what the Buddha taught in the suttas. Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and about how the Buddha taught. Because it's not just what the Buddha taught, it's also how he taught. Actually, if you want to know what the Buddha taught, it's not too hard. There's any number of books that'll give us a summary of Buddha's teachings and so on, Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Noble Path and so on and so forth. So you can read a kind of summary of those main teachings. That's fine. But when the Buddha taught them, people got enlightened, right? Not all the time, right? But sometimes people get enlightened. But when the Buddha taught them, those teachings came alive. There was something meaningful to them. And you just can't keep repeating those same things and keep them alive in that same way. Right? So this is something that I think is really important for our Buddhist tradition and Buddhist education. It can't be just, we're going to repeat this curriculum of what Buddhism is. Right? It has to be about, how do we find that spark of inspiration and that spark of insight? That's the tricky part. So when the Buddha himself taught, sometimes he would teach sort of generic teachings for generic people, right? Just a group of people, and would teach the Four Noble Truths or something like that. But very often he would teach to all kinds of different people from all kinds of different backgrounds and with all kinds of different contexts. Sometimes people would come along and challenge him, right? And so in ancient India, for example, in those days, there were lots of wandering ascetics and philosophers and so on. One of them came up to the Buddha and said, okay, what I believe is this. I don't agree with anything. Right? Honestly, a lot of people today are like that. Right? Mm. Right? Any view you give, they'll just knock it down. Right? Anything's not good enough. Anything's wrong. Blah, blah, blah. I don't agree with anything. So the Buddha says, what about that view of yours? Do you agree with that? Right? And that still is a very relevant response, right? That's, again, so common these days. People will be like, oh, I don't agree. This is all wrong. This is all wrong. Well, what about that view of yours that they're wrong? Is that view wrong as well? Right? So this idea of like this kind of nihilistic, dismissive, cynical approach to things actually is self-defeating. So this is just one example. There's countless examples like that when the Buddha would give a teaching that was for a particular person. And in some way, he would make that teaching come alive. Sometimes it would be by just observing the things around him. Yeah, this is, I think, also really important. Honestly, I'll just give you an example of this. When you remember Graham Lyle, of course, right? So you were probably at Graham Lyle's funeral.
Yes, I was.
Right? And a bunch of people spoke at Graham Lyle's funeral, right? One of the things that I really noticed about this, and it kind of reminded me, it was like a bit of a parable for Buddhist education. Person after person got up and told us about how Graham Lyle had a good sense of humour. And none of them made us laugh. And then I got up and spoke, and I cracked some dumb joke, as I usually do, and people laughed, right? Actually, right, that's the difference. It's not just saying that the Buddha was saying, teaching like this, or that this was said, but it's about seeing something that's meaningful. The Buddha wasn't teaching from a textbook. He was teaching from his life. He would walk into the town and then see an elephant or see a metal worker or see, a pregnant woman or see something, and then that would spark this idea, and then he would give this talk. So teaching has to come from life, and it has to be involved with and relate to people's lives. Now, but it's not just that. The Buddha's teaching was also very interrogative. Right? One of the most common phrases that the Buddha says in the suttas is "Tanking manyata." What do you think? Constantly he's saying this. What do you think? Right? And yet today, when you look in Buddhist education, very rare, right? Very rare that people will actually engage with their audience. But this is basic psychology. Any educationalist will be told this, right? And if you do teacher training, they'll say you have to engage your students. You can't just sit there and lecture them. What do you think? Yeah. And so these methods, the Buddha also taught how to listen, right? How to engage. To first of all, you have to have like that positive attitude where you approach the teacher and approach the teaching. This is the first thing. Also very important. Like the student approaches because they want to learn, right? It's not being shoved down their throat, but they want to learn. They approach with a respectful attitude to the teacher. Then they ohita sota, yeah, bend the ear, right? Actively listen. Yeah. Again, this is something I've told people off about this many times today, because a lot of the times people like put on YouTube, put on some Dhamma talk, and they just let it wash over them, right? And you have this kind of passive environment where Dhamma is happening in some kind of way around you. Yeah? It's not how the Buddha taught to listen to Dhamma. Yeah? Ohita sota, you bend the ear, listen carefully. Yeah? Doesn't matter if you listen for, hour after hour, but even just one word or one line if you listen carefully. But not just to listen carefully, also to remember it. Right? To remember the teaching. How many people here can remember the different topics that I've addressed in the talk so far this evening? First topic was?
Meditation.
First topic was meditation. Great. And then I talked about
the resort. Not the resort. The story at the start in Thailand.
Right. How we encountered the Dhamma. Right. Great. Very good. Excellent. And then I talked about reading from the Dhamma, from the suttas directly.
Yes.
Very good. And then I talked about engagement, right? That's what we're doing now, right? You see, because now you all feel uncomfortable and awkward because you're actually being asked to do something rather than just sit there and feel virtuous because you attended a Dhamma talk, right? But that's how you learn, yeah? So about engagement, counter-questioning, yeah? So to remember, actually remembering things is quite easy. It's a lot easier than we think it is. But the reason we don't know how to remember things is because we don't try and we don't learn how to remember things. If you want to remember something, this is how you do it. While you're listening, every 5 minutes or so, you remind yourself what you've just heard. Just like we did just now. What topics have we talked about? Oh, yeah, that. Okay, fine. That's it. It only takes a few seconds. You do that, and then every 5 minutes or so in the talk, remind yourself that's what we talked about. Ah, okay. Remind you, that's what we talked about. Remind yourself. And what that does is that saves your RAM onto your hard drive. Right? So that when your brain shuts off, like when your computer shuts off, all the data in your RAM, it gets lost. Stuff in your hard drive is still there. Yeah. If you remind yourself of what you learned 2 or 3 times, then you'll remember it. And you won't have to, you won't have to be embarrassed when the teacher asks you if you've remembered anything. So that's good. That's at least some advantage that you get from that. But seriously, that's a really excellent technique. So remembering it, then inquiring as to the meaning. Also very important. learning is an active process, not just blindly accepting things, but asking yourself, is that really true? What do you mean by that? How does this fit into there? It has to be an active process of inquiry. Then discussion, right? Can't be just you solo, right? There has to be a community aspect. We learn things with people and through bouncing ideas around, clarifying our ideas, through speaking them. All of these things are part of a process of learning and part of a process of Buddhist education. Then when all of those things we've done, then we meditate. Right? Then those teachings will start to sink down to a deeper level. Ultimately, those meditations will become experiential, rather than just hearing about the Four Noble Truths or hearing about dependent origination or hearing about the Eightfold Path. You'll actually start to see it, and you'll start to see in your meditation. Oh, right. What did the Buddha say? Suffering. Oh, right. Oh, that's suffering. Yeah. That's at least one noble truth. I mean, surely we can at least get that one. Even if that's the only noble truth we can understand, at least we can understand that we're suffering. So that's something. But then why? Right? Why are we suffering? Then you see that craving coming. Okay. So that's the cause of suffering. When you let go of that cause of suffering, mind is peaceful. Yeah. So there's got to be a way to do that. That's the Eightfold Path. So this is in brief how Buddhist education is done. And in my view, whenever we're teaching Buddhist education, we should give a grounding on what the suttas are saying. I think it's also important to acknowledge that I'm not saying that everything that we should be teaching is in the suttas, and I'm not saying we should only teach that. I'm not saying we shouldn't be teaching and learning from other traditions and other teachers as well. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the Buddha's teachings in the suttas are the foundation. And how you want to draw on and practice that foundation, whatever tradition that you're in, whatever teaching you're in, or whatever lineage you're in, will be incredibly enriched by having an understanding of the suttas as well. Because all of those teachings, all of those teachers, all of those lineages, all of those traditions draw from the teachings of the Buddha. And you can almost always find, if you look at modern traditions, you say, oh, well, one tradition is here and one tradition is there. Actually, if you trace them back, you can say, oh, well, they actually both come from things in the suttas, but they've just drawn them out in different ways. They emphasize them in different ways. So this is why, to me, this is really important. Now here, I've got on the table here some examples of the suttas for you to see. So these are some of the books printed from SuttaCentral. And I think probably most of you have some familiarity with SuttaCentral, but I'll just mention briefly what we do there. So SuttaCentral is a long-standing project, nearly more than 20 years now. And one of the things that we're doing is we're hosting translations of the early Buddhist texts. So that's the early Buddhist suttas and Vinaya. The suttas are the discourses, that is the teachings of the Buddha, and the Vinaya is the code of conduct for the monks and nuns. So in recent years, I've translated the suttas, and Venerable Bhimali has translated the Vinaya. This is not all of it, but this is a sample. So there's actually 28 books in total. So this is, 6 out of those 28 books. I'm going to read for you a couple of verses now, just for fun. Why not? So this is the Therigatha, okay? This is one of the most fascinating books in the whole Buddhist canon, because this is a book by the ancient Buddhist nuns. This is probably the oldest spiritual book by women in the world. Certainly one of them, right? Or probably the oldest. And so this is a translation that I made some years ago. I'll just read a couple of verses just to sample, okay? So this is the very first verse in the Therigatha, which I love. And the verse goes like this. Sleep softly, little nun, wrapped in the cloth you sewed yourself, for your desire has been quelled like vegetables boiled dry in a pot. So I love that verse because to me that's one of the most intimate verses in the whole of the Pali Canon. right? It sounds to me like we don't have any context for that. We don't even know the name of the nun that it's addressed to, right? But it sounds to me like two nuns who are friends, right? It's very intimate. Sleep softly, little nun. And like she's just been up all night meditating or something like that. And she's just having a rest. Or maybe she's come from a long journey or something like that, right? And sort of references like these kind of like this kind of domestic imagery, like the vegetables boiled dry in a pot. So they're like taking that, what at the time would have been considered women's work, and then giving that, using that. So it's quite like a bloke wouldn't say that, right? Right? You wouldn't use that kind of imagery, right? You'd say like, oh, you've broken free of your shackles like a great elephant has broken out or something like that, right? You'd choose some different thing, but that's a really kind of soft and very beautiful imagery there.
There's a real tenderness to it,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'll just read one more. I just came across this one. This also is a fun one. That state's very challenging for the sage. It's for the sages to attain. It's not possible for a woman with her two-fingered wisdom. What difference does womanhood make when the mind is serene and knowledge is present as you rightly discern the Dhamma? Relishing is destroyed in every respect and the mass of darkness is shattered. So know this, wicked one, you're beaten, Terminator. So this is verses by Soma. So the speaker in the first verse is Mara, who's like the tempter figure in Buddhism, like the tempter or the symbol of death or something like that. So I think it's very important to understand. You just missed out that one.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's terrible. No, don't be sorry. But you're just not going to understand anything that I'm going to say. I'm going to read it again because you missed out. That state's very challenging. It's only 3 verses. That state's very challenging. It's for the sages to attain. It's not possible for a woman with her two-fingered wisdom. See, this is the kind of thing, right, that you find in religious books all over the world, right? Except it's usually God or someone who's saying it, right? So in this case, it's Mara who's the bad guy. So it's explicitly the bad guy who's telling women that they can't do it. And Soma responds, the Bhikkhuni, what difference does womanhood make when the mind is serene and knowledge is present as you rightly discern the Dhamma? Relishing is destroyed in every respect and the mass of darkness is shattered. So know this, wicked one, you're beaten, Terminator. Some of you might question why I put the word Terminator in it. Well, obviously. Well, it's a very literal translation. Antakara, anta is end, kara is maker, end maker, Terminator. I could hardly avoid it. It was just like right there. Okay, so I used to be a science fiction fan as well. So that might have influenced it as well. But anyway. So, but that gives you an example. Like, you see what I mean about that thing about those teachings being alive, right? That's not a teaching which is like past. It's not a textbook teaching, right? It's not a teaching about, can women practice the Dhamma and a kind of abstract discussion of it, right? It's a woman who is practicing the Dhamma and who's realizing it and who's witnessing it through her life and experience, and whose voice is captured and transmitted down through the years. So this to me is what is so meaningful about, well, this collection in particular, the Therigatha, but about the suttas in general. So someone said on there, we need names. So here's the Vinaya. One book of the Vinaya, there's 6 books, it's one book. And this is the rules for monks and nuns. So this is fun. Like, even though actually, some of it's pretty technical and so on, but there's actually a lot of really interesting things in there as well. But many things we could talk about here. But one of the things which is really interesting about this, so this, again, one of 6 books, but is it sets up a constitution and guidelines for running a spiritual community as set up by the Buddha himself. right? But obviously, not everything is applicable today. I mean, not even monks and nuns will keep all of the rules here because obviously technology has changed and all of that kind of thing. But what's really interesting is the way that the Buddha acted as a leader in setting up this community. We talked about this before, about like how certain leaders, who shall remain nameless, who stay into power into their 80s and 90s without wanting to relinquish it, and how, apart from anything else, that just shows a lack of faith in younger people, younger generations. And the Buddha was not like that, right from the beginning. Straight after his enlightenment, one of the first things that he started doing was empowering his students and giving them the authority to perform ordinations, to build the communities, to build monasteries, to do teaching, and all of these kinds of things. And so he's constantly acting in a way that will depersonalize it, like make it not about him, but make it about the community who can work together in order to build. And that, to my mind, that's the key reason for the resilience and the long-standing of the Buddhist community over the years, especially for the sangha. I mean, it's just astonishing, the fact that we can still be sangha today and still follow these rules from 2,500 years ago. I mean, it's just crazy. And yet, sure, there are a couple of things where, like, there's a technique for how to sew rows. Well, these days we use sewing machines, something like that. So sure, there are some differences like that, but most of the things actually still work really well. So that's the Vinaya. And what else we got? So these are the 4 Nikayas. So again, there's many more books. It's just one example from each. This is the long discourses, middle discourses, linked discourses, and numbered discourses. And so these make up the bulk of the Buddha's teachings that are found in these 4 prose Nikayas. So yes, these are the main teachings which we've translated on SuttaCentral. So one of the reasons that we're having this little meeting today and that we wanted to talk about it is that we're currently doing a project to do fundraising for printing these for the Sri Lankan monastic colleges that we call Pirivenas. So I'm just going to say a few words about that project, and then we can maybe open it up for a wider discussion, because I know we're kind of running out of time. So in Buddhist countries and Buddhist communities, then they have ways of teaching education for the sangha, for the monks and nuns. Those institutions, like every other educational institution, faces massive challenges because the world is changing, because the challenges that we're facing and the needs that we're facing are so different. Now, in Sri Lanka, the system they have is a system that they call Pirivenas. So it's important, I think, to understand and really just kind of appreciate that all of these things that we have, all of these teachings, come from Sri Lanka. Right? They were all transmitted by the Buddha, transmitted and passed down in India, and then brought by the monk Mahinda to Sri Lanka, and from there to the rest of the Theravadan world, and from there to us today. So, of course, there are many other teachings in the Buddhist traditions other than the ones through Sri Lanka. But these early Buddhist teachings that we have primarily passed down through the Sri Lankan Dhamma community. So for myself, I feel an incredible gratitude for Sri Lanka, for the island, for the people, for the Dhamma community there. And I think I'm really thrilled to be able to have the chance to try to do something to give back. Now, some months ago, we were approached by the Pirivena Education Unit, which falls under the Department of Education in Sri Lanka. And they said that they wanted to support English language education for the monks and nuns there, but they didn't have the resources, and they didn't have the materials. And they asked us if we could help. And so we came up with this project together with them to print 1,000 sets of these books for the Pirivenas. There's over 800 Pirivenas in Sri Lanka, so we want to print 1 set for each of them. And so that's a project that we're working on at the moment. And our aim is to print these in Sri Lanka, and 28 books in total, and 1,000 sets. So we are collecting donations for that through SuttaCentral and through Raisley. So if you are interested to support that project, fantastic. Go to SuttaCentral, and I'm sure you can share the SuttaCentral URL or whatever, Tina.
Yes, I have already.
Already. And then you can do that. And also, if you can share that on your social media or whatever, most appreciated. Every little bit helps. And the big bits help also. So that's something to me is so important, because for that fundamental purpose of education is that we have to look after the future, right? And we have to look after future generations. And just as we have received that great blessing and great benefit to encounter the Dhamma in our own lives, then we have some duty, I think, to make sure that people in the future will do that. We don't know. We do this, print them, send them off there. We don't know. Some monk or some nun is going to wander into there, pick it up, and their life's going to be changed. Maybe they're going to become enlightened. Maybe they're going to go off and found some great monastery. Maybe they're going to become a world-renowned teacher. Yeah? Who knows? Yeah. So we can't we can't foretell this, and we can't shape the future, but we can make it possible for people who want to draw near to the Dhamma, who want to approach the Dhamma, to find a way to actually hear and encounter the Buddha's words and be able to learn from that. So anyway, that's just a few words for you this evening on Buddhist education. And I just maybe open it up for questions, see if anyone has any thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bhante. Yeah. People online have been saying that one said that, why do I feel so at peace listening to this sermon? Someone says, same here. Bhante Sujato has that effect, doesn't he? Absolutely, Nikki.
I'm like audio Xanax. I just make all. Anyway, thank you for that. That's very nice. Sorry.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, please pop it online. You could also pop your hand up if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Also shared the link to SuttaCentral translations for the Piravinas. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube later, we'll also link this in the description below as well. Yeah. Now, one set of these books is $195 only, right? So with $195, you can print a whole set of this to support the whole 28 books.
Yeah, and if you're a book geek like me, proper books, real books, like these books are okay. But we're talking cloth bound, hardcover, sewn bindings, one of those little red dangly things. Real books we're going to be doing. So this will be the printers in Sri Lanka will do a really nice job.
Yeah, so special. Yeah. And of course, these sets of books can be passed on for many generations.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah. Incredible. So we all have this opportunity to participate in this. So we'll be collecting donations, either cash or also you can transfer the money over too. So we do have a question online, Bhante.
Please.
So what made you, Bhante, start with the translation of the books? I mean, the start of SuttaCentral.
Well, the start of SuttaCentral and the start of the translation were separated by quite a number of years. I started SuttaCentral with my friend Rod Bucknell and John Kelly back in 2003. At that time, Rod had SuttaCentral was originally a set of parallels. That is, connections between Pali, Chinese, Sanskrit, and Tibetan. So all of these original language texts passed down in separate traditions, but there are thousands of connections between them, we call parallels. And these had been collated by scholars, and Rod had them in tables. He was going to publish them as a book. I'm like, surely the internet is the right place for that, right? Yes. No one wants to look up a table of all of these books, but you can click on a link, right? None of us knew anything about it. It was 2003. I barely knew how to press the start menu on a Windows computer at those days. But we figured it out and we got a website going. And so that was the beginning of SuttaCentral. So after some time, I got interested in doing the translations because there are a number of things that led to that. One of the things was that, like I said, we were linking, but then all those links would go offline. You know how it is, website go offline. So that was a never-ending job. But then I realized that there weren't any really good translations around the place. Like there were good translations, but they were maybe not complete. Or there were translations that were not available because of copyright restrictions or different kinds of things. And so we were trying to support translations. And by the way, SuttaCentral supports translations into multiple languages. So the project we're working on currently is English translations, but we have over 40 languages on SuttaCentral. So, and I realized that we really needed something better. I think we need something better because it's the Dhamma, and we should do it as best as we possibly can, and not just good enough, right? It should be exemplary. It should be the best we can. And so we set about making a new set of translations that would be freely available, would be accurate, that would be consistent, and that would be readable. One of my aims in translating it was to make it so that people could read it. And one of the reasons for doing that was because I lived in Malaysia for like a year and a half. And you begin to realize when you're communicating with people who speak English as a second language, you realize that actually it makes a huge difference. Maybe the English might be fine, but it makes a big difference if you can, just the simple things like if you can write short sentences and if you can, use sort of declarative forms. These things actually make it much more readable. So my aim was to try to bring it across so that it sounded like the Buddha was talking to you. That's the aim. Can't always do that. You do your best, So that's how that came about. Yeah.
And you modernized the text as well, didn't you? Like the Terminator.
Oh, the Terminator. Only in cases where it was strictly justified by the Pali text, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a couple of Australian isms in there for people who have sharp eyes and some things like that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Does the dunny appear in any of that?
I don't think, is there a dunny? There should be, though. I asked Marley, there should be in the Vinaya, there definitely should be a dunny. There is a billabong.
Oh.
So we got that.
Okay, great. And you were talking earlier about using the comparison with the different traditions. So how much of the different traditions really are in common in the suttas?
Stacks of it. So so when I first started getting interested in this area, like more than 20 years ago, there was very little information and a few scholarly articles and so on. Most of the work that's done in that field has been done by scholars in Japan and Taiwan and not translated into English. But since then, we've got the work by Venerable Analayo, who's done a huge amount of work in that area. So basically, all of these suttas, right? So if you look at all of these suttas in this Vinaya, so this whole 28 books, okay, probably 90% of that has what we call parallels in Chinese translations, probably 90%. A few don't. The Therigatha does not. That's why it's one of the very precious things in the Pali Canon. So, but the Vinaya does. In fact, there are 6 Vinayas in Chinese. They've not been translated into English, most of them, and in Tibetan as well, and in Sanskrit as well. There's a lot of Vinaya material. And 2 versions of the Anguttara, 2 or 3 versions of the Samyutta, and so on. So there are thousands and thousands and thousands of these that have been studied. And when you study all of them, honestly, it's one of those areas that is, on the one hand, very fascinating, but on the other hand, a bit disappointing, because at the end of the day, they're basically the same. So you do all of this work, and you're like, yeah, it's pretty much the same, but this bit's maybe a bit different. That's it. And so Venerable Analayo has written like so many books on this, and that's basically what all of them consist of, is like saying they're pretty much the same, but this bit's a bit different.
But that's really important to hear too, right?
Exactly.
There's so much more in common between the traditions than there are differences, which people just like to emphasize the differences.
Exactly. And the differences are invariably things that are very minor in importance, like maybe one section comes before the other, or one's expanded a bit more in detail than the other, or these kinds of things. There's no real differences of substance.
Mm.
So what that means is that these are teachings that were passed down among the early Buddhist community.
Mm.
They're not Theravadan teachings, although they belong to the Theravadan school. They're Buddhist teachings.
Yeah.
And they've been inherited and form the basis of all the different Buddhist traditions. Yeah. So to me, again, this is really important reason why the foundation, like no matter what the tradition that you're in, doesn't really matter, but studying the suttas is most important. Like when I was just in Taiwan a couple of months ago, an academic conference, this is the Samyutta, right? So the parallel to this is the Samyutta Agama. So Taiwan is technically a Mahayana country, right? Buddhism, the majority form of Buddhism in there is Mahayana Buddhist. But overwhelmingly, the students are studying this book, and studying the Samyutta Agama. That's what they're interested in. And when you see it, it's even hard to sort of say, but when you see any of the teachers, if you see the Dalai Lama talking or see any of the teachers talking, you can always see where his teaching is coming from. It might be just a metaphor or an image or an idea, and you can see how he's like drawing on these things from the suttas. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you. That's really important work, especially now where we want to create more harmony and cooperation between the different traditions in our world. Thank you. Bhante, another question. How does Bhante recommend reading Dhamma regarding to when, how often, etc.? Reading Dhamma, reading Sutta.
Very good question. Thank you for that. Okay, so now in terms of meditation, my standard recommendation is 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Do you have a standard recommendation, Tina?
Yeah, I think, well, half an hour.
Half an hour? Mate, hardcore. 20 minutes I think is nice because it's enough that your mind gets peaceful, right? But much longer, 20 minutes, half an hour, I think for most people, if they try to sit much longer than that, the mind tends to get a bit sleepy. Like if you're on retreat or if your meditation's really good, like if your meditation's good and bright, great, meditate as long as you like. But there's no point in really forcing yourself to sit for a long time. If your mind's just tired, better to have a short meditation and be bright. In terms of reading the suttas, I would suggest read one sutta a day, maybe before your meditation, right? And then it will sink in. Yeah, read slowly, right? Start with if you want to, you can start with the numbered discourses. Most of the discourses in here are pretty short. Right? You can see it's only like basically a page long, and most of them pretty simple in their structure and so on. And you can read them, reflect on it, go back, okay, and then come and sit and do your meditation. If you want more help and support for this, then there are some resources on the front page of SuttaCentral, but really the best place to look is a website called Reading Faithfully, if you want to get started. Yeah, so that's a good SuttaCentral friend, Venerable Kemaratana. And he's sort of curating and putting that together for Reading Faithfully. And you can find the link on SuttaCentral or just Google it. And he's sort of done a really nice job of like introducing people to it. SuttaCentral itself is a bit more, we're a bit more like a library. So it's a bit more intimidating. Like it's like you walk into the library here and say, I want to learn about anthropology. Where do I start? Right? It's a bit difficult. So Reading Faithfully is a good place to start. But yeah, I recommend when reading the suttas, don't be thinking of any particular outcome, or don't be like trying to understand everything. Don't worry if there's things you don't understand or whatever. Suttas are very much into repetition with variation. If there's something you don't understand, it's going to come up again. You can guarantee that, right? But over and over again, gradually you learn to recognize the context and you learn to recognize the patterns. Just be slow and patient, and don't see it as being like something that you have to get through. You see it as an opportunity to spend some time listening to the Buddha.
That's nice. Bhante, another question. I've been recommended a book called What the Buddha Taught. Bhante, do you have any opinion on that one?
That's what Paula Rahula's book. That's a classic in the thing. That was I think the second book I ever read. The first book was Handbook for Mankind, and I think What the Buddha Taught was number 2. So yeah, it's great. It's good introduction.
And another question is, can we buy the books for ourselves from SuttaCentral?
Yes, you can. Let me zip back to Paula Rahula's book. One of the things I still remember all of these years later from reading that is he told the story in there about King Ashoka. And so King Ashoka lived about 150 or so years after the Buddha. And I remember when reading that, how moving I found that story of King Ashoka. I'd never heard of Ashoka, right? But he was this incredible emperor in ancient India who, when he came to the throne, committed these terrible acts of violence and butchery, and then was converted to Buddhism and wrote these edicts confessing what he'd done and asking for forgiveness from his people. I mean, who does that? Right? Seriously, who does that? And I remember when reading that was something that was like particularly moving for me. I think it was because it was this example that this is not just something that's a theory. This is something actually you can put, that somebody who's a huge emperor can put this into place and actually create something incredible that changes the lives of so many people. So that's something I always remember from Paula Rahula's book. So what was the other question?
Can we buy the books for ourselves from SuttaCentral?
Yes, you can. Go to SuttaCentral and you'll see the publications page there, and you can click through and you can order them. And these are printed on demand from lulu.com that you can navigate through. Unfortunately, at the moment, you have to order them individually because that's how Lulu is kind of structured. So we're looking for a better solution for that. If you've got a better solution, let us know. Currently, you'll have to order each one individually, and they'll be printed and posted to you. Yeah. Books are the best, right? You want to read something?
Yeah.
Sorry? Videos are best? Films are best.
Most digestible.
Films are most digestible. How would you make a film of the suttas?
That would be very difficult. But I think a great film, will have that within it, just through the air of it. And I think, like, for example, like you were saying, how did you come across Buddhism?
Yeah.
For me, like how I came across Buddhism was through an anime.
Okay.
And so some people...
Which anime was it?
It
Avatar?
was called Naruto.
Not Avatar?
Not Avatar. But, yeah, so
I have vivid memories of walking through the streets of New York.
Yeah.
And the people walk past you and they'll go, Avatar!
Yeah.
The roads.
Go on, yeah.
If you think about it...
What was the anime, sorry?
Naruto.
Naruto.
But if you think about it, what you were doing with these books, you're like Swansong.
I am,
right?
yeah.
But what happened with
not really
Swansong's story?
Yeah.
It became more than him.
That's right, yeah.
And it became the Monkey King, Sun Wukong.
That's right.
And people were introduced to that story through him.
Right.
And then it got elements of absorption through Hanuman.
Yes. Yeah.
The loyal servant.
Yes. Yeah.
And Hanuman is the Monkey King.
Yes.
And he's the servant. But it's kind of switched around. He's like, Swansong's an idiot. There is a Swansong.
I hear what you're saying. I'm an idiot. Yeah.
But like, yeah. So this story also is in another anime as well.
Oh, really?
Dragon Ball Z. Okay. Where they look for the Dragon Balls and they're looking, rather than looking for the books of knowledge to translate and bring it over, or in that trying to find the books for immortality in the Monkey King. But through in that it's the Dragon Balls.
Okay.
And once they gather the Dragon Balls, they make a wish.
Right.
But it's a manipulation, so it transmutes itself it's like Chinese whispers.
Mm.
You say something,
You can't say Chinese whispers.
nowadays you can't, but back in my day, we used to be able to say Chinese. It's a game.
Yeah.
And it transmutes and transmutes and transmutes, and it becomes a collective unconscious of ideas.
Right.
And so your book is actually a Chinese whispers of multiple people with all their traumas, their histories, their ideas. And that book is just a manifestation of thousands of people. It's a chat GPT of the olden day.
I was with you till ChatGPT, but yes.
It's a collective hive of thinking.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But
it's
a story.
So just to clarify, like you mentioned Naruto, and is that the story of Xuanzang and so on? Is that told in Naruto or not?
Not really,
directly?
but he's quite a fool. Like Naruto is kind of similar to kind of Xuanzang. Imagine
Xuanzang's like he's depicted as a holy fool in that thing. Like he's very open, he's very innocent.
Yeah, there's the Bodhisattva in it.
Yeah.
There's like ideas of pain.
Yeah.
There's this villain who wants to create pain and suffering for people so that they submit and so they don't create more pain if they understand pain. But then he talks to him and he talks about love and adding love, and it changed the cycle of pain. So this is like karma, samsara. And they don't say that. They don't use these words.
Yeah.
But like, so I think it's the story that's the most important.
Yeah. But that was one of my formative influences was, of course, Monkey Magic in those days. We watched that when we were kids, and that was the story of Xuanzang and taking they called Tripitaka in that, and the
Journey to the West.
The Journey to the West, the monkey, the fish, and the pig, who was greed, hate, and delusion.
Yeah, it's great.
So they can accompany him on his journey. Anyway, so
Bhante,
thank you for that. Yeah.
Are you ready to be a comic, a character in a video?
No.
More seriously, actually,
Yes.
I was thinking about this. Would you be interested to actually record the readings of the suttas? Because, very often hearing people read the suttas is also very powerful as well.
Yeah. Honestly, that was a project that I started when I came to Sydney, and one of my plans was to do that. But I got distracted, so it didn't happen. But maybe at some point. There are audio versions available. Actually, you can get them both on through SuttaCentral. We have our SuttaCentral voice app. We'll have them read. Or you can buy them as audiobooks through Audible.
Yes, I've got those.
Oh, right.
I do have your books on Audible.
On Audible,
yeah. It's great.
Yeah. So that's like professional voice actors.
Yeah. But it'll be great coming from your voice, especially from what we've heard online with people saying, like, hearing your talk today just makes so calm.
Hearing me give a Dharma talk made them fall asleep right away. But it is something that I would love to do, actually.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of finding the time.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. Well, we now come to the end of our session. So thank you so much, Bhante, not just for sharing your teachings and your projects with us today, but importantly for your many, many years, your decades of tireless service to the Dhamma. And over the years...
I'm tired.
Well, actually, do you ever sleep with all of the work that you do?
Yes, of course.
Amazing. But also what you've done is you've created not just these books and these translations, but also this opportunity and this resource that will be available, no doubt, for many generations to come. So thank you. Sadhu. Bless you.
So thank you so much, Tina. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And may you all find the blessings of the Triple Gem.
Thank you, Sadhu. So, Venerable, would you be able to end us with sharing of merits?
Sure. Okay. So in the Buddhist tradition, one of the ideas that we have is that not only should we do things that are good, but we should also recollect those good things that we've done so that they don't get forgotten. And we have this idea of dedicating or even like giving away the merits. You don't really give them away. It's okay, you still have them. but through the act of giving and dedicating the merit, then it's the idea that what we do has a sense of abundance. So today we've all gathered together as a community in harmony, and we have meditated together, we've discussed the Dhamma, we've listened to the Dhamma, and all of these things are very meritorious activities. So we've created like this huge energy of goodness. And so through the dedication of merit, we can share that with all sentient beings. Sambe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata amhe sambhatam punya sampadam sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya etavata amhe sambhatam punya sampadam Sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhyanti.
Sadhu, sadhu. And Bhante, with all the merits that we have done, I hope that you will have a long, healthy life so that you can continue your good work in supporting the Dhamma and to be able to realise the Dhamma within yourself and for all of us. Hey, so thank you, Bhante. Thank you, everyone, so much. And I really hope that you will support the amazing work that Bhante has done and started, and you make your donations so that you can also be part of this historical event in being able to create these sets of translations for the Piravina Education Unit in Sri Lanka. So remembering $195 for one full set of the translations, and you can make your donations online. And we will post that link in the chat, as well as also if you're watching this on YouTube in the description below. So thank you all so much.
Good day.
See you next time.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.